Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. Thank you for joining us for our special coverage of Day 3 of the 2020 Democratic National Convention. The third night of the convention wrapped up Wednesday evening with Kamala Harris making history. The California senator officially accepted the vice presidential nomination. She becomes the first woman of color ever to appear on a major party's ticket. Harris began her acceptance speech paying tribute to her mother and said her nomination was a testament to the dedication of generations that came before her. The virtual night also included moments from two other former groundbreaking candidates, Hillary Clinton and President Barack Obama, who recounted selecting Joe Biden for the top of the ticket in 2008. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton used her spot to reflect on the 2016 election and what it's like to go up against President Trump. She urged Democratic voters not to sit this year out. Here's some of what you may have missed.
I never expected that my successor would embrace my vision or continue my policies. I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously. For close to 4 years now, he has shown no interest in putting in the work, no interest in finding common ground, no interest in using the awesome power of his office to help anyone but himself and his friends. No interest in treating the presidency as anything but one more reality show that he can use to get the attention he craves. Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't.
The morning after the last election, I said, we owe Donald Trump an open mind and the chance to lead. I meant it. Every president deserves that. I wish Donald Trump knew how to be a president, because America needs a president right now.
As Speaker of the House, I've seen firsthand Donald Trump's disrespect for facts, for working families, and for women in particular. Disrespect written into his policies toward our health and our rights, not just his conduct. But we know what he doesn't, that when women succeed, America succeeds.
This crisis is bad, and it didn't have to be this way. This crisis is on Donald Trump and the Republicans who enable him. Donald Trump's ignorance and incompetence have always been a danger to our country. COVID-19 was Trump's biggest test. He failed miserably.
This administration has shown it will tear our democracy down if that's what it takes for them to win. So we have to get busy building it up. Tonight, I'm asking you to believe in Joe and Kamala's ability to lead this country out of these dark times and build it back better.
As president, Joe Biden will rejoin the international climate agreement, and the United States will once again lead on this critical issue. We have the chance this November to end two existential crises: the Trump presidency and the environmental annihilation he represents.
For 4 years, people have told me, I didn't realize how dangerous he was. I wish I could do it all over. Or worst, I should have voted. Look, this can't be another woulda, coulda, shoulda election.
We are at a crossroads. We can let the shooting continue, or we can act. We can protect our families, our future. We can vote. We can be on the right side of history. We must elect Joe Biden.
Let's bring in Nikole Killion, Caitlin Huey-Burns, Major Garrett, Leslie Sanchez, and Joel Payne. Nikole is a CBS News correspondent. Caitlin is our CBSN political reporter. Major is CBS News chief Washington correspondent. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst, and Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Once again, how lucky am I? My journalistic and analysis cup runneth over. Welcome to all of you. I want to start off by just going around, getting reaction to the speeches that we heard tonight, of course, from Senator Harris, from President Obama, and from Hillary Clinton. Let me start with you, Major.
So Kamala Harris's speech was, in every way, shape, and form, pure history. But it is pure history in the context of a pandemic. And if there was a time when I know Democratic delegates would have roared at the top of their lungs, it would have been for this historic moment. And I think this speech and the absence of a crowd and the pandemic limitations of a virtual convention are very real, because this is a moment, and I know from some experience what moments like this are like on a convention floor, because I remember being on the convention floor in 2008 when the Democratic Party officially nominated Barack Obama as the first African American to lead a major party ticket in this country. And the sense of emotion, elation, tears, long journey, arc of history, all of that was in every single fiber of the carpet beneath everyone's feet and in the roar of their voice. That's something that could not happen tonight. That's the context around this. And yes, it was a speech of the kind every running mate would give. A little bit of biography, hard hits on the incumbent administration, and an embrace of the presidential nominee. In that respect, it was very standard, but the history around it isn't. And that is something that went through the entire evening tonight. I'll come back with some other observations about things that caught my eye, but you cannot talk about this night without talking about Kamala Harris and that moment.
So with that framework, Nikole Killion, let me ask you, because I know you have been doing a great deal of reporting on the reaction, especially among Black women, to this choice of Kamala Harris. Tell us about what you saw in that speech by her tonight.
Well, I think to Major's point, while we may not have seen everybody gathered on a convention floor tonight, you can all but guarantee that there were women across this country crying in their living rooms as they watched that speech. And I can say that from the standpoint of talking to people who grew up with her, talking to some of her sorority sisters, and talking to stakeholders who have been working for years to get more women of color in elected office. And so to finally see this moment, a moment like this come to fruition, is significant. But also in the people that know her best, one thing I heard time and again, whether it was her congressional colleagues or again people that she grew up with, was just how authentic she is. And because of her diverse background, how that makes her uniquely positioned for this moment and uniquely positioned to grasp a range of issues that this country is facing right now. And I think you heard and saw all of that in her speech tonight.
Caitlin, let me turn to you. You're also out there on the campaign trail. I want to get your thoughts on what we heard from Senator Harris tonight and also from President Obama. It was a very forceful rebuke by President Obama against President Trump.
What I found striking in these two speeches and from the speech from Hillary Clinton was the focus on voting and voting rights. You heard from the speakers tonight an urging of the audience to get out there and vote, but also noting the roadblocks and barriers there are to voting, especially as we are in the middle of a pandemic. And there are questions about not who people will vote for, but how they're going to cast their ballot, by mail or in person with masks, as Elizabeth Warren talked about. And that's been a theme throughout this convention and will likely continue into the fourth day. Today, also, Kamala Harris noted the 100th anniversary of the ratification of women's suffrage, but she also noted the women who have been left out of our recounting of that history, Black women suffragettes who did not see those full rights recognized for several decades later, and those rights again coming under barriers or facing barriers. So voting rights at the center of this convention and the thread throughout both of these speeches tonight.
Joel Payne, let me turn to you. This was a moment in history. What was your take on seeing not just the speech by Senator Harris and President Obama, but as Caitlin was talking about, hearing from Hillary Clinton as well at this time?
It was a really remarkable night, and I think your framing is right there, Elaine. Again, it was Senator Harris, it was President Obama, it was Hillary Clinton, it was also Speaker Pelosi. I think Democrats were trying to emphasize that history is made when women are empowered. You bring up the first female speaker and Speaker Pelosi, obviously Hillary Clinton, and now Kamala Harris. And then I want to take a moment just to kind of focus on President Obama. And all due respect to Senator Harris, I think she gave a fantastic speech. I thought she did what she needed to do. I think Major's analysis I agree with. It was the appropriate balance of telling personal narrative while also, punching at President Trump and laying out that argument. But President Obama's speech was phenomenal and remarkable. And, I've consistently still called him the most gifted messenger in the Democratic Party, and he proved that tonight. I tweeted earlier, it's like watching Michelangelo paint the Sistine Chapel. And one other thing, Barack Obama is somebody who we think of as having this connection with African Americans, and he certainly does. There was a surge of African American vote in 2008 and 2012. But let's not forget, Barack Obama also appeals to people in the middle. I worked the 2008 presidential campaign, and I remember when Barack Obama, one of the first things he associated himself with was reaching out to those Reagan Democrats. He called them Obamacans. And I heard a lot of the same notes that he cast in 2008. I heard them tonight in appealing to the middle and appealing to people who might have voted for Donald Trump last time around, who put their trust in him, even people who may have wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think Obama's speech was really just a remarkable feat in recent political history. It's one of the better ex-president speeches I've heard. And I actually think it probably made Kamala Harris's work a little bit difficult. Again, I thought she gave a very fine speech, and I thought she did what she needed to do, and I think it will fire up Democrats. But Barack Obama, in my opinion, was the star tonight.
So, Leslie, it's interesting to hear Joel say that this was a pitch in some ways by President Obama for those in the middle, and yet at the same time, by going after President Trump so directly, so forcefully, it was clearly a break with what had been a precedent, that is former presidents, not necessarily going after sitting presidents. What did you hear tonight?
Well, former President Obama has certainly dipped his toe in that area before, whether it's a message on Facebook or a tweet, kind of going out there and saying that he will present his voice when he feels it's necessary. But I think both to Joel's point and Major's point, what we heard with Barack Obama, it reminds you why many people miss Barack Obama. He was transformative for a generation, a candidate and a president that you wouldn't have had, and the country never imagined. I remember his speech, his acceptance speech in Invesco Field, 90,000 people. It was like a snow globe in there. And it were so many people. And prior to that, during the primary, the Hillary campaign had a really tough time understanding why women wouldn't vote for a first female president, and why women wouldn't support their gender and would support Barack Obama instead. And what you saw tonight, the distinction Obama can do is he doesn't talk about identity politics in the same way you heard in all the other speeches. He brought a bigger feeling to tonight's speeches. And that's what's so compelling about it. I thought Kamala was very, very, very strong. And it illustrated one other really important point, that again, Joe Biden is the supporting character. He was the support under Barack Obama. And again, he's kind of outshined by his vice presidential pick. And that's something I will say Republicans who were thinking of abandoning Trump are really struggling with, is what are they buying into? And that future ticket is not necessarily what they're ready to accept. They want to know, they want security and stability now.
Caitlin, it was interesting to see Senator Elizabeth Warren, to see the economy focused on in that primetime hour. I know you're someone who, I thought of you when I saw her come up because I know you had followed her primary campaign. I wonder, Caitlin, what was the affirmative case from your perspective that was made for Joe Biden tonight with respect to the economy? Because we heard Elizabeth Warren talk a lot about this issue of child care. What did you hear in that argument? What was that affirmative case for Joe Biden?
Elaine, in listening to Elizabeth Warren tonight, I was thinking about when I was on the campaign trail with her about a year ago when she was campaigning in places like Iowa, giving that same type of speech, matching it to the moment that we have right now. But she has been talking about childcare for over a year, referencing her Aunt Bee and how she came to help her out and how most people don't have that opportunity. That is a problem that is even more pronounced in a pandemic. You have women really bearing the brunt of this pandemic, women being most of the country breadwinners and having young children and trying to figure out how to get their kids back to school, how to get childcare for their kids so that they can get back to work. That's been a theme through her campaign and very present tonight. We know that Elizabeth Warren has been advising the Biden campaign, especially on economic policy, and she was on the short list to be his running mate and has been working closely with the campaign on these issues. But a lot of what she's been talking about an unfair economy, about how to talk about racial injustice can't just be done in a conversation about criminal justice reform. It extends to housing, to health care, to your basic economic bottom line and opportunities, housing. Those are kind of all showing now with the pandemic, those inequities. And so that tonight she was really able to kind of talk about her own policies as if they were also Joe Biden's, and we know that she's been advising him.
On this question of racial justice, Nikole, it's interesting. There had been, of course, some skeptics with respect to Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor. I wonder if that's something that you'd heard about in your conversations with people regarding her pick. Were there people who wanted to hear more specifics and who want to hear more specifics about her evolution on this topic of criminal justice reform?
Well, I think that certainly was an issue in her presidential primary campaign, and I think it will be an issue that she will have to explain further as she proceeds now as the vice presidential Democratic candidate. But look, I mean, I think from the standpoint of racial justice, certainly through this pandemic alone, she has been very vocal. You heard her talk about the importance of making strides in the name of people like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. So she has been very proactive on that front. But yes, in terms of her record, some progressives in particular do feel that she was too soft during her time as California Attorney General. When she was a local DA in San Francisco, that, she kind of waffled and that she didn't take strong stances and do enough to, fight against issues of police brutality. So I think that is a space and an issue to watch, an issue where she does need to explain herself more. But at the end of the day, I think people will have to look at the totality of her record and kind of what she has done since, and of course, make a decision for themselves.
Major, this time yesterday on this program, you had raised this issue of how the notion of Joe Biden's understanding firsthand of grief and loss and suffering was something that seemed unusual to you in the presentation of it front and center last night. And it was interesting to hear President Obama today kind of pick up on this empathy idea that you had talked about. I wonder what you made of that part in particular of President Obama's remarks, because we are living in a time where, the data show there is an increased number of Americans who are reporting mental health issues in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. And so this notion of suffering might be particularly resonant now.
Right, and to be clear, I wasn't criticizing this emphasis. I was just saying, based on my experience, it's something you would not expect to see as a biographical component of the presidential nominee of a major party. That it would be, under normal circumstances, regarded as kind of overwrought and over-emotional and maybe too much of a downer. But in this time, to your exact point, Elaine, we are, as a country, feeling anxiety, uncertainty, and in many instances, downright trauma. And to have a sense that someone who you might vote for or might consider voting for has a demonstrated history of living that, experiencing that, and acting in a way that you might find most reassuring is something that clearly the Democratic National Committee and the organizers of this convention saw as a net plus last night. And President Obama wanted to reemphasize that point. Let me make a couple of quick observations about tomorrow and what I also saw tonight. Tomorrow, Joe Biden cannot be the lesser of all of his previous supporters. He has got to be their equal and, if possible, be better. But he has certainly got to be their equal. Linda's point is very valid. There are a lot of people who are going to be watching very closely tomorrow night to see how on it, how with it, how good Joe Biden is in the moment, in the history, and in the delivery, and the sense that this is his time and he is aware that this is his time and he is ready for it, not only in terms of believing it, but conveying it. We learned in 2016 that you can have a lot of concerts. Hillary had a lot of concerts and a lot of celebrity supporters, but ultimately the choice is the person at the top of the ticket. And Joe Biden will be that person. And tomorrow night he's got to meet that threshold. Be as good as Kamala Harris. If he can be as good as Barack Obama. Maybe not that's the high standard, to Joel's point, but he's got to be very good. One other point about tonight. Oftentimes in presidential politics, the major parties revert to their basic issues and their basic constituencies. But there are times when that sort of rote reference to basic constituencies and basic issues take on a larger thematic framing. Historically, the Democratic Party, I've been to many conventions, I've heard these in speeches in many previous conventions, references to nurses, school teachers, frontline workers of some kind, people who work in grocery stores, people who work in the service industry, healthcare workers. Those are core constituencies and long-standing priorities. But now, in the terms of this pandemic and how it's played out and how those vulnerabilities and the value of those workers has become a universally understood and in many cases universally appreciated component part of our workforce, that takes on a different characteristic, a different resonance, it seems to me. It's no longer a boutique recitation of party priorities and party constituencies. It's about something larger. Last point. It seemed to me tonight, more than the previous two nights, that the second nominee for the Democratic Party wasn't Kamala Harris, it was vote. Vote, 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 vote. Have a plan. Here's the way, here's the way, here's the way. A repetitive recitation about this necessity to not just have a passion about this, but have a purpose and a mechanism to express it through the ballot box. That also struck me in a way that I had not seen at previous Democrat or Republican conventions. This repeated message about to emphasize, to underscore, and to dramatize voting.
And Joel, I just want to pick up on that point from you because as someone who understands firsthand, what was at stake in 2016 and how Democrats have obviously examined what happened in 2016 and are looking at 2020, as has been reported, obviously with a lot of trepidation, as we've heard others say. What did you make in particular of Hillary Clinton's portion of her remarks where she did urge people to vote? I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Well, it actually seemed like what Secretary Clinton was really serving to do was be the cautionary tale for what could happen if you don't vote. And I think she's talking to, those populations in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and North Carolina that frankly didn't show up, right? It's the neighborhoods in Milwaukee and in Philadelphia and Detroit and Charlotte that didn't show up. Not just those folks, but you get what I'm saying. The people around the margins that would have helped Democrats go over the top in 2016 in those key states. And she was really the cautionary tale, saying you can even, she even kind of, I think she made a sarcastic comment, an ironic comment, you can even win by 3 million votes and still lose. She said that in her remarks as well. So I think that was her role. Hillary Clinton always has a tough job because she's got to serve multiple masters, right? She can't seem bitter, but she has to kind of reflect what happened. She also needs to reflect the history of her moment and also kind of look forward. She's asked to do so much. I think she did a really capable job of that, as Secretary Clinton always does. And I think that was a good feat for her this evening. But one other thing I would add here, I think that that Kamala Harris really did a really great job of laying out the case for how Democrats are going to push back against Donald Trump. And she started it last week when she was nominated, and she continued it. She expanded upon it. I talked to people near Senator Harris's camp, and what they told me was that she was going to go in on Donald Trump. In fact, we noticed all of these speakers did. I think in the past, you might have seen Democrats be very hesitant to go super kind of negative or what might be perceived as negative. Kamala Harris was not concerned about doing that. Hillary Clinton wasn't concerned about that. Barack Obama wasn't concerned about that. They were all very sharp. Michelle Obama earlier this week, all very sharp in their criticisms of Donald Trump. Nobody wants to be accused of leaving any tool unused this time around.
Leslie, I want to ask you, given that we're in a moment where there seems to be some heightened awareness, at least in some quarters, of gendered language, of, some might say racially coded language or insensitive language, what might be the Republican lines of attack? Will that matter at all in the way in which not just President Trump, but Republicans go after this ticket?
Elaine, that's really the most pivotal and probably fascinating part behind the scenes of where Republicans stand. It's the case of two campaigns, right? It's the White House campaign, the populist campaign of the president, who's going to say, here's Hillary Clinton. I think we'll hear a lot about that again, talking about the reality that she had extraordinarily high negatives, which really folded in. And 2016, in many cases, toward the end, from the nomination all the way to the end, was like a coronation. It was assumed that Donald Trump would never win, and that she was going to be the next president. That's why there's so much bitterness there. I'm sure the campaign will talk about that, talk about the failure. He's already started the name calling again, and the parts that make establishment Republicans really cringe. I think if you're going to look at the policy, there was a balance act here that they didn't have in the previous speeches about, okay, it's not just a vote of opposition. This is what we stand for. We're going to do all these bountiful promises on everything from immigration to climate control. But when you look at execution of those, it's a dismal record, and a record with a lot of holes. President Obama says he's going to have immigration reform. Norm O'Donnell talked about that earlier this evening, in 100 days. They just pushed that down the line and never got that done, and he was known as the deporter-in-chief. Here is Biden talking about he wants to look at climate and energy and make the growth in this area, but he's going to have to address fossil fuels, and he's also the person at a rally that told coal miners who are concerned about job security they need to learn to code. I mean, when you can go on and on in terms of the disconnect between the idea of these policies and how it meets our economy and people that are struggling with jobs and health care. And that's where the argument should probably go, policy to policy. I don't know if we'll see that.
All right, one more night for the Democratic Convention. I want to thank my panel, Nikole Killion, Huey-Burns, Major Garrett, Leslie Sanchez, and Joel Payne. Really appreciate it.